The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada calls to action includes Call to Action number 63, which calls for the Council of Ministers of Education to maintain an annual commitment to Aboriginal education issues. One of these educational issues is building student capacity for intercultural understanding, empathy, and mutual respect. For us to build this student capacity as teachers, there are some considerations. One consideration is ensuring that Indigenous perspectives are present and accurate history is being taught. When choosing and sharing classroom materials such as books, maps, or videos, teachers need to take a step back and ask, whose perspective is being shared? Whose perspective is being left out? Why might that perspective be left out? And how can we ensure that important perspectives are being represented? By including books that are written by Indigenous authors, you are presenting your students with the perspectives of Indigenous people, challenging stereotypes, and allowing Indigenous people to take control of their own image and representation in classrooms. Indigenous students are able to see themselves represented in the books you are reading. Non-Indigenous students gain empathy and respect for Indigenous people and their perspectives when presented with books by Indigenous authors. All students are able to see that Indigenous perspectives are valued when they are presented with materials created by Indigenous people. Creating space for Indigenous voices to speak for themselves and share their stories is a very meaningful strategy that avoids appropriating Indigenous culture. Which leads us to another consideration, cultural appropriation. I know that there are aspects of various Indigenous cultures that many people find interesting and would be really fun to explore in a classroom or in a school setting. I mean, have you seen dream catchers? Of course you have. They are beautiful and have a lovely story. But do you know which Indigenous nation that story comes from? How were they actually traditionally used? Were they traditionally used? Have you consulted with community members from a local First Nation about dream catchers? Did you find your dream catcher craft on Pinterest? Well, Indigenous cultures are not for anybody to just take as they please and then change it so it can fit into their 30-minute art lesson. Aspects of Indigenous culture are very sacred and may be learned through ceremony and may take a really long time to get the full understanding of. To take parts of someone else's culture that you find cool or interesting and use in your classroom is cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation is hurtful to Indigenous people because it reduces our very unique, very diverse cultures into pop culture items and stereotypes. But there's good news. You can avoid cultural appropriation. Make sure that you are teaching accurate Indigenous history and are including Indigenous perspectives and are not trying to teach Indigenous culture. Have you found or created a resource that you think does a great job sharing Indigenous voices, stories, and maybe even culture? Ask yourself these questions. Is the resource you're wanting to use created by Indigenous people? Is the resource historically accurate? And how do you know? Is the language used respectful? And does it reflect the fact that there are many Indigenous nations with unique traditions, languages, and cultures? Does the resource name a specific Indigenous nation? If you answered no to any of these questions, or if students are being asked to copy artwork by a specific group of people or Indigenous nation, or if the resource perpetuates stereotypes through language and images, or if you're just unsure, you should hold off on using that resource and seek out somebody who can offer some assistance. The Lambton-Kent District School Board has an Indigenous education team that can help you to find the answers to these questions. If you are in elementary, you can reach out to me. I can help you find ways to embed First Nation, Metis, and Inuit perspectives in your class in respectful and meaningful ways. I hope that this video helped you to understand ways to appropriately and respectfully amplify and share Indigenous voices and perspectives. Miigwech, thank you.